I forget who said it. I think it was Honest Trailers when doing a review of our movie today said that some franchises are like people. When they die, they shit themselves. Thus is the case with X-Men, Dark Phoenix, or just Dark Phoenix. I'm not exactly sure because I think Disney, once they bought Fox but were obligated to release this movie, said, we don't want it called X-Men. We have plans for the X-Men. We don't want this movie screwing that up. And boy, oh boy, oh boy. First of all, I this is sort of nice to be able to show you guys again. These are my two case X-Men collection with all of them from the first movie to Dark Phoenix, and I was able to complete it when Dark Phoenix came out. Uh, I now have every empty spot filled, and that's always a very satisfying thing for me, especially as I kind of come to the end of my DVD collecting days. Uh, I bought this because I couldn't bear the idea of having collected all of these movies and not having the final one, the last in the series. And don't start talking to me about New Mutants. If that movie ever even does come out, Disney's gonna bury it in Hulu or something, and I don't consider that part of that's sort of a one-off kind of a thing. I don't consider it part of it's like that Generation X TV show from the 90s. I wouldn't consider that part of the X-Men film franchise canon. Uh, I don't consider New Mutants part of it. But as for the movie itself, it's hard to say that it's worse than X-Men Apocalypse. X-Men Apocalypse is, I think, arguably the worst in the franchise. This one, it's funny because each of these prequel movies is set in a different decade, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and now the 90s. With, of course, the actors never aging, with James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender looking exactly the same as they did in First Class as compared to as they looked in Dark Phoenix. Even though, this is the fourth decade that they're being seen in. And even though that, the events of the first X-Men movie are a decade away, and they're supposed to, in that time, turn into Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen. The timeline for the X-Men franchise is the worst kept timeline in the history of film. I have never seen a timeline so botched, so utterly and completely and thoroughly, it really ignored. Nobody cared. From movie to movie, from film to film, nobody cared to keep track of what. Nobody cared to see what happened in the last movie. Everybody has been pointing this out. At the end of X-Men Apocalypse, Jean Grey unleashes the Phoenix Force that is inside of her. And then Dark Phoenix is all about how she gets the Phoenix Force inside of her, even though she had it in the last movie. She said 10 years earlier. Oh, okay. The movie itself is probably not as bad as X-Men Apocalypse. Um, it features the same completely uncharismatic cast from Apocalypse that play the younger versions of the original X-Men characters. I would say the one that fares best is whoever it is playing Storm. Uh, she comes off more Storm-like than Halle Berry did. Halle Berry. I mean, it's funny because I think that the problems in the X-Men movie, as far as the consistency, it disappears literally in the second movie when Halle Berry just basically came in and said, "Okay, I'm a bit of a bigger star now. I'm not doing the accent. I know I did it in the first one. I know Storm is supposed to be from Africa. I'm not doing the accent. Deal with it." And I get the feeling too that Nicholas Hoult, and especially the never interesting to watch Jennifer Lawrence, both said, "We're bigger movie stars now. We're not putting on the blue makeup. We're not doing it." I mean, Mystique went from, in the first X-Men movie, in the First Class movie, mutant and proud. And that one line in, I think it was X2, where she says, where Nightcrawler asks her, "Well, you can change your shape. Why not just stay looking normal all the time?" And she says, "Because we shouldn't have to." She goes from that to Jennifer Lawrence not wanting to wear the makeup at all. She wears it like, what, twice in this movie, I think. The rest of the time, even in private, she's Jennifer Lawrence. Now, you could make an argument that maybe because the idea of this movie, the setup, is that the X-Men, after the events of Days of Future Past and Apocalypse, that society has become more accepting of mutants, and the X-Men are actually heroes that people look up to. In no way trying to ape the Avengers movies. You could say that, okay, maybe Mystique decided that, well, she wanted to look, maybe she was self-conscious, maybe she wanted to look normal for when she's on TV, whatever. It doesn't excuse the fact that in private with Charles Xavier or with Hank McCoy, that she's still not blue, that she's the disdain that Jennifer Lawrence has for this part, for these movies, is so evident on her face, in her performance. She is so, over it. I don't, I'm contractually obligated to come here, but, I'm a big movie star. I have an Oscar, okay? I hate Jennifer Lawrence. I hate Jennifer Lawrence. I cannot stand the woman in real life. I have never liked her in a movie. Everybody goes on and on and on about Silver Linings Playbook. It's fine. Is it her best performance? Yeah. Did it deserve an Oscar? No. So that's spoilers ahead for a movie that nobody should even watch. Mystique dies early in the movie, and that makes it an improvement over X-Men Apocalypse. That might be the biggest thing that makes it an improvement. The 90s setting, they do nothing with it. They do absolutely nothing with it. In the three previous movies, they really kind of work hard to capture the decade. X-Men Dark Phoenix does nothing. Absolutely nothing to look like it was set in the 90s. It could be set now. It could be set at any time. It wouldn't matter. The plot, which is laughable if you call it that. The X-Men go on a space mission. Jean Grey gets this space creature inside of her. Has the Dark Phoenix powers. Kills Mystique. The X-Men fracture off, half turn against her, half want to save her. And for some reason, Professor X is portrayed as a villain in this movie, when really he did nothing wrong. Shockingly, rather than stick closer to the comic book for their second attempt at doing the Dark Phoenix saga, the director, Simon Kinberg, who oversaw some of the worst X-Men movies, decides to basically repeat a lot of the plot problems from The Last Stand. It's really shocking how terrible this movie is in this day and age. The effects are laughable. They are TV level effects. If this was a TV movie of the week, it would be one thing. It doesn't look like a $200 million theatrical release. It's Michael Fassbender and James McAvoy sort of have been the MVPs of this series all along. But you can tell really in the last one, and especially this one, they don't really want to be there anymore. They've got other things. This is a contractual obligation. They have to be there. And really for the final film in what has been a very important film series for the superhero genre. I mean, X-Men. Everybody, yeah, Blade came first. No disrespect to Blade, but X-Men was the first blockbuster, the first huge. Now, and Blade too is a character that's lesser known. A lot of people who went to go see Blade had no idea he was a Marvel comic character. They thought it was just sort of a Matrix ripoff. But or actually no, it predated the Matrix, didn't it? By a year or two. Maybe the Matrix ripped off Blade. But anyway, X-Men was the first, like, we're going to take characters that are well known, well established, and we're going to make a big movie about them. And there have been some great movies in this franchise. I mean, I know a lot of people don't count Deadpool. They see Deadpool as its own thing. But Deadpool has the X-Men in it. Deadpool shows the mansion from the movies. Deadpool, even at one point, in an amusing little cameo, has the characters from the prequel movies in it. There's references to the X-Men movies. So I count Deadpool and Deadpool 2. And those are great movies. Logan is amazing. Logan would be in the top 5 greatest superhero movies ever made. It really is barely a superhero movie. I think arguably Logan, when people talk about, oh, how daring this Joker movie is that's coming up, they wouldn't have made it if not for the success of Logan, if not for the success of Deadpool and showing that R-rated comic book movies could be made. Hugh Jackman's career is owed entirely to the X-Men movies, and I think it's you could argue that he hasn't done a lot outside of the X-Men movies that is of note. Days of Future Past is great. I've argued before that Michael Fassbender and James McAvoy deserved Oscar nominations for their performances in First Class. X2 remains one of the best follow-up movies. It's The Empire Strikes Back. It's The Godfather 2. There's good stuff in this franchise. And then there's X-Men Origins Wolverine. It's sad that half of these movies are pretty terrible, and the other half are great. I don't think there's a lot of in between kind of mediocre movies in this franchise. I think you could argue the first one doesn't really hold up, but at the time that was ripping off the Matrix for sure. It was kind of revolutionary what they were doing. It did issue in, along with Blade and Spider-Man, the sort of what has become the dominance of Marvel Comics in Hollywood. There's gold in this shit pile. It's sad to watch the franchise go out on such a low note. And to see it, I feel like there's just this bitterness, you know. The whole train sequence at the end of the movie had to be reshot because it apparently, whatever the original ending was, it resembled too closely Captain Marvel. And so they had to go in, I'm assuming as a Disney mandate, and reshoot the ending because they were like, you're not messing up our big, giant, billion-dollar Captain Marvel movie by ripping it off in the same year. So they went and they reshot the train sequence. And at this point, the Disney merger probably hadn't gone through yet, but it was going through. Everybody knew that this was it, that the X-Men franchise under Fox was going to be dead, that Disney was going to reboot the X-Men, bring them into the MCU. And so the train, the guards on the train, on their arm, I'm assuming that the letters are supposed to stand for, in the context of the movie, Mutant Control Unit or something like that. MCU. Them giving the middle finger to Disney. And you know what? In the years to come, I don't know that Disney will be able to top the likes of Logan, Deadpool, Days of Future Past. I don't know if they'll be able to do that. But I guarantee you they will give us a more consistent X-Men franchise. And I hope maybe, like, I mean, I would love to see them kind of retire the Avengers, that brand, focus on building a new team, and the X-Men are the perfect one to do that for. You could do spin-off movies. You could do solo Wolverine movies clearly work. They could bring Deadpool into the MCU. I've always argued that what would be hilarious, if they really they should decide to continue Deadpool as an R-rated movie, they should bring Ryan Reynolds back, basically taking the first two Deadpool movies and retroactively making them MCU movies. They absolutely should do that. And then maybe when you bring Ryan Reynolds into the team up movies where they can't be R-rated, have him bleeped out, but have Deadpool realize he's being bleeped out. I think that would be funny. I think it would be funny for him to acknowledge what was going on, like, to see Professor X, or to see Wolverine and make a comment about, "You're not Hugh Jackman." Those things would be really funny. Deadpool could break the fourth wall and sort of really kind of make us laugh at what's happening, the fact that they're rebooting this whole franchise, but he's still in it. As far as the Fox X-Men movies go, and Dark Phoenix especially, it's sad. That's all I can say. It's sad that these beloved characters were not treated with more respect, that they were just sort of thrown into these sort of terrible, awful movies. It's depressing. Watching Dark Phoenix is depressing. I'm going to go 2 out of 5 because it's slightly better than Apocalypse. It probably is more on par with X-Men Origins Wolverine. It's definitely worse than The Last Stand, which is a movie that I never had really huge problems with. I know a lot of people do, but it's not really... It's not as good as X2, but I don't know. And it definitely makes some big mistakes, but I definitely think Last Stand is a little bit unfairly maligned. But Dark Phoenix is not. 2 out of 5. This movie sucks. Unless you are an X-Men completist, unless you are like me and you're OCD and you needed to have it, don't get this movie. It's not worth it. Wait 5 years. You'll get your Disney X-Men movies. And look back and remember the good times from this franchise. Because this is not one of them.